Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance, and I do a weekly video segment called Lessons from an Old Quilt. And I also have a vlog, and I'm currently in the middle of a organization challenge, which I post every Monday. And anyway, I'm so happy you're here. Today we're gonna look at another quilt that's very, very special to me. It was made by my great-grandmother, just like the crazy quilt that I featured a few weeks ago. So this particular quilt was on my bed growing up. So growing up, it was one of my very first introductions to quilting, and I couldn't believe somebody actually made this quilt. And I would always ask my mom about it and, talk about the embroidery and the different parts. And there's just so many things about it that I absolutely love. So let's get started looking at this very special Sunbonnet Sue quilt. Okay, admittedly, this quilt is in somewhat of a rough shape. It has quite a bit of stains and wear and tear. I can't say I was the most delicate child with this quilt, so we will see some stains throughout, but overall it's just a very sweet quilt and very special to me. So I did pick one of the better blocks to start with, and I'm going to show you the block itself, which is right here. This adorable Sunbonnet Sue block. But if you notice, my great-grandmother added these sweet pink borders to the block, and I love that. It's subtle, but it is there, and it just gives a nice frame to this Sunbonnet Sue block. So the Sunbonnet Sue block itself is appliqued and then embroidered, and they're itty bitty applique stitches that you can barely see along the edges, all done by hand. And then of course this wonderful embroidery. We got some lazy daisy stitches and some French knots and just some running stitches, and it really just adds to the overall look of this so nicely. And then on top of that, not only was this all hand appliqued and then also hand embroidered, it was hand quilted with the ittiest bittiest little tiny stitches in this crosshatch manner. And the stitches go directly through the applique, but the embroidery is on top of those stitches. So I'm not exactly sure how she did it. If she must have actually, when she was quilting it, she stitched underneath the embroidery, because the embroidery doesn't go through to the other side. So this would have had to have been embroidered and then appliqued and then quilted together, which is really neat. One of the coolest features, other than the quilting and the applique and the embroidery, is the trapunto. So trapunto, we'll show you one right here. And you can see there is actually a stain on this. Like I said, I wasn't exactly the most delicate of children, so there are a lot of stains on this quilt. But trapunto is where you stuff the quilting or the quilted part from the back with stuffing, and it makes it 3D. So let me see if I can hold that up so you can see the puffiness of it. Do you see how it is 3D? And my grandmother, great-grandmother rather, would actually went to the back of this and stuffed it ever so slightly. It looks like right there's one of the holes, with batting, and made it all puffy. And those pieces of trapuntos that look like leaves, and I'm going to call them leaves, are at each intersection of the blocks. Isn't that sweet? Now, one thing that's also unique about this quilt is that the block kind of ends here. So we don't see a top border on this. In fact, it almost looks like it might have been cut off or something. I don't think this was by design, but it is on both ends, so maybe it was. And of course, like I said, again, another evidence that I was not exactly a delicate child, because the binding is just in tatters. But hey, it holds a lot of memories for me. Something else that I think is sweet, and I love this particular Sunbonnet Sue, even though she's coming up some, is that some of these stains I remember making, like I believe this is chocolate from chocolate ice cream, and I was eating ice cream in my room and I wasn't allowed to, and I believe that that's what those stains are from. So even some of the stains are special to me because they just remind me of some of the things I did that I probably shouldn't have been doing. So let's take a look at the back. So you can really see the trapunto on the back too. And you can also see that wonderful quilting that's just so yummy. And this quilt, I wish you could feel it because it is super, super soft. It's just one of those quilts you want to cuddle up with. It is obviously well loved, and I know that for a fact. And it is also just a comfort. It is one of those quilts that you just want to wrap yourself in because it is indeed so, so incredibly soft. Let's turn it back around. And I just want to take a minute to look at some of these cute Sunbonnet Sues because they're all different and they all kind of match. So they match, their outfits match. I mean, so their bonnet goes with their fabric, with their dress fabric. And usually the bonnet, the arm, and the feet are the same solid, and the dress is a print. And my great-grandmother did such a beautiful job coordinating everything together. All of the stitching along the edges, though, is done in black, but then the flowers do kind of match the dress. I'll show you another one. Let's look at this pink one here at the bottom. Like, look at her, isn't she cute? So again, we see the solid, 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 and then this really sweet, I think they're elephants on there, of or little animals, there's a duck, is the dress is just a little sweet dress that coordinates with everything. And then we even have the pale pink flowers that kind of match the dress, and then the green leaves. And again, that black stitching around the edges. Let's look at one more. Let's see. So here too, we see the same thing with the matching of these fabrics and then the coordination of this fabric with the flowers. So a lot of thought and time went into this, and it's just something we need to remember as makers, that these quilts are special to people, and they, you know, people do cherish them, even though sometimes we think they don't. They really do, and it just all comes back around to how important quilting is. So what can we learn from my great-grandmother? So the first thing I think is important to learn is that the embroidery that's on applique. So not only did she hand applique the motif, the Sunbonnet Sue, onto a background, but then she went ahead and she embroidered on the applique. And again, I know I caught a little bit of grief from my last video about my great-grandmother's quilt, the crazy quilt, saying that she was showing off, but come on. She's showing off in this a little bit with her embroidery skills, don't you think? I mean, this embroidery is pretty impeccable, and I love that. I love that she took two arts or two sub-arts from quilting of applique and embroidery and combined them into this. And I know it's not a new thing to do that, but it does add that extra element and just makes it yummy. The next thing that we can learn from my great-grandmother is adding trapunto, putting that puffiness into those leaves. What a neat element to add to the quilt. Now, she didn't do it a lot. I mean, there's plenty of trapunto in this, but you know, it wasn't the main focus. I would argue that the Sunbonnet Sues are the main focus, but it does add that really neat feel to it. And I didn't even know what that was until probably I was quilting like 5 or 6 years before I even learned what trapunto is. And to think that it was in my life for so long and I never even knew it, you know, that's pretty cool. And then finally, the last thing I think we can learn from her is the pink borders around each block. It really sets a frame for these. These girls look to be framed in this block, and almost like little pictures on the wall or something. And I love that it's that light pink. And yeah, it could have faded over the years, but I think it was always that pale pink, or at least that's what I remember, right up against that white. So there's not a lot of contrast, but it definitely gives you that frame that you need to set these blocks apart. Thank you so much for looking at this wonderful quilt with me. I hope you enjoyed it. It's so special to me, and maybe someday I'll pass it along to a granddaughter, maybe. I don't know. I have 2 boys, and I don't think either one of them want a Sunbonnet Sue quilt, but here's hoping that someday somebody will appreciate it and have it on their bed too, as I did growing up. As always, thank you so much for watching, and please consider subscribing if you haven't done so. And I will see you next week for another episode of Lessons from an Old Quilt, and I'll see you later this week for my weekly vlog. See you soon. Bye.